Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so we'll get started here. This is the regular City Council meeting for June 18th, Minnetrista. So welcome everybody this evening and those of you watching on YouTube. First, I'd like to remind everyone, including myself, that you should put your electronic devices on airplane mode or silent. And then also, would you please join me in Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So with that, I'll do some introductions. First, I'm Lisa Whalen, I'm the mayor, and to my left are council members, Pam Mortenson, Mike Molitor, Shannon Bruce, John Tschumperlin, and on the end we have our city engineer with WSB, Paul Hornby, and then also our director of administration, Cassandra Tabor, and to my right, our city administrator, Mike Barone, finance director, Brian Grimm, community development director, David Abel, and our city attorney with Kennedy and Graven is Ron Batty, and then on the end we have our chief of police, Paul Falls. Next is approval of our agenda. I might have to make one change, and I apologize. Jeanne Brustad and I had communicated a number of months ago and agreed that she'd be here this evening, and I forgot to follow up and remind her of that, and I don't see her here yet, so I'm going to assume she probably forgot. So she'll be coming at a later meeting. Unless she arrives, we'll keep it on there, but again, I should have called and reminded her. So with that, are there any other changes or additions? If not, is there a motion to approve the agenda with that one exception?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, motion has been made by Ms. Mortenson and seconded by Mr. Molitor. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. So we will start with our SEH Water Tower discussion. Mr. Jensen, welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council, staff. I think this is a follow-up. This is a follow-up to when I was here, I believe, on the 7th, and I apologize for talking a lot. And so hopefully we'll go through this a bit quicker. But put together a presentation, and if you can, does this work? Yep, it should. Hey, I go. So I put together a short outline. Wanted to just quickly visit the water storage needs. Have a refresher on the alternate sites that we were looking at. Talk a little bit about the elevated tank option, the ground storage reservoir option, some costs. Talk a little bit about the system operation, kind of compare how the ground storage reservoir operates compared to elevated tank. As I had mentioned before, I got a bunch of ground storage reservoir photos to show you different configurations of the tank. And then the last item was a central zone pressure evaluation. So a lot of this information appeared in that May 3rd memorandum, and so we're just going to be going through this, some of this stuff again. The photos are new, and then some of the operation stuff and the evaluation on the central pressure zone. So with me is Chad Katzenberger. Chad is one of our hydraulic modelers. So the people that put your system and design it into a computer model, and then they simulate different sort of operation scenarios. So with that, I think the first one here is for you, Chad. Sure. Okay, I'll do this.
Well, I think first things first, we just wanted to revisit where we've been in terms of determining the need for some form of a storage tank on the south zone water system. And this is straight out of that previous memo showing historical water use as well as projected water use into the future. As that system grows, it's kind of hard to read on the screen.
When you
but
say system grows, you mean as our population grows?
population grows,
Okay.
and so goes the water use and water demand on the system.
Okay, and then can I just have a question real quick? What projections did you use? I know we're averaging somewhere around 90 homes a year, at least the past 3 or 4 years. What projections, have you been using those numbers?
Yeah, basically, we've been taking a look at how things have grown in the past and what we expect, how we expect things to grow in the future, and added about roughly that number of connections on a year-over-year basis.
So about 75 to 100, somewhere in that
We've
range?
been using 75 for when we do our budgets and everything and stuff that's
Okay.
based on that. That's, it's a little less than what we've been seeing, just to be a little conservative.
Right, we want to be conservative. Okay, so your water storage needs are based on about 75 unit homes a year being added.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, yeah. And that's really the simplest way, kind of a starting place for looking at how much storage we would need for a water system.
And are those 75 homes being added in the southwestern sector of Minnetrista or overall?
It would be basically the south zone as a whole. So, the south zone will.
Because we've been seeing 75 per year for the entire city of Minnetrista, not just the southern sector.
Yep, so I think the assumption was that basically the southern zone is where we're gonna be seeing lion's share, majority of the growth kind of moving forward.
Well, and we're going to see a lot of growth in Woodland Cove, which is already served by the tower there.
Yep. So those all are kind of interconnected and will really see a benefit from both towers. They work in conjunction with one another, so this new storage tank won't just serve the southwest, it'll serve the entire south zone in conjunction with the existing water tower. So,
So they'll be connected?
yes, yep,
Okay.
through the water system, they are connected. Yep.
Okay, so it's it's actually the southern, southwest, and the central zone that these two tanks will be
Correct, yep,
for, okay.
yep.
And
Really-
just to chime in on that, yeah, so you're right, 75 permits, and that's the whole city, but the other systems, the only thing that's really left developmental-wise is Red Oak. Dutch Lake Second and all that is built out, so that's why, in my conversations with them about projections, we talked about, all of our growth in the next near future will be Woodland Cove, or Hunter's Crest, the ponds at Hunter's Crest, which is the southern system, so largely, you can make the assumption that all of our growth is going to be in the southern or the central system in the future, because there's no other active development occurring. Or Serenity Hills is in the southern system as well, so
Mhm.
that's where the conversation went.
So really that's kind of driving the need. We've established that we need about a 500,000 gallon storage tank to serve the system in the future, whether it's elevated or ground storage. So with that, we took a look at some different site options, started with 5. Tonight I think we've got a little down to 2 different specific sites that we're going to discuss a little bit more at length moving forward here. Those are the 2 that are outlined there. One in the park and one off County Road 92.
So, if you recall, this was, these 2 figures were included in the May 3rd memo as well. And the top figure here merely shows that we're trying to maintain the same hydraulic grade line, and Kings Point, where it's located, the ground elevation is a little bit higher, and so you get a shorter column, as opposed to Hunter's Crest area, where we're seeing potential for some taller towers, and so this tower here is more expensive than that one if they're the same size, just because of the additional column height. And I just wanted to reflect that again. So site 3, which is Lyle Park, and site 5, which is County Road 92 site. We looked at this and considered the cost of construction of the tower just based on the existing land elevation in that area, and then Chad went ahead and said, well, okay, what's it gonna cost to connect this water tower at that site to essentially the 12-inch trunk system that runs through Hunter's Crest? And so that's where we come up with these total numbers there. So in round terms, and this kind of makes sense if you think about it, kind of a 92 site is a little more expensive because of the length of the transmission main kind of. And then this just kind of reiterates it a little bit more, where talked a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages. So, Well Park, for instance, the land's already owned by the city. Perhaps one of the disadvantages is, tank in a city park. Conversely, 92 site, you got the fact that the property would have to be acquired, and that there's going to be a longer, that's. So then we also looked at ground storage. Now the idea with ground storage is visually it's just kind of a little bit more out of sight. And how does this system work? And basically what you see here is we would have the same storage amount, but rather than having the water already pumped into the tank and ready to go, you fill it off of the hydraulic grade line into the tank, and then you boost it up as you need it later on. So that's a little bit of the difference there. And so the ground storage reservoir and booster station, I want to make sure that that's clear, that for the ground storage, you'll need a pump station, and I have some pictures of some typical ones that would go along with that, to be able to get the water back up into the.
Mr. Jensen, can you explain too, you said something about, last time you were talking about the ebb and flows of the water pressure and stuff, and that the ground storage would not address that?
Yeah, I'll have Chad, we have a slide on that,
Okay,
and just
all
go
right.
a little bit, but yeah, they do operate a little bit differently. So the ground storage reservoir, I just wanted to give you an idea what goes into that, and again, this was in that May 3rd memo. So cost for site work, for water main, for the pumping station I was talking about, the ground storage reservoir itself, and in this case, it's a 500,000 gallon ground storage reservoir. And so it kind of gives you an idea here that it's in the same ballpark really as elevated tank in this case. I think that if I back up a little bit, it appears that it's, a little bit less in terms of a capital cost right now than going with a elevated tank. And then there's some maintenance costs that we'll come to.
It's actually about the same based on if you take the line, if you're truly comparing the tank versus above ground versus underground, based on your slide 2 back. One more. I'm sorry.
This way?
Yep.
Okay.
Keep going back. One more. There. If you look at the 4th column in, it's 2.415 versus 2.458. They're about the same.
Right. The only thing here is you got the water main got to connect.
Right, but I'm talking about the cost of a tower versus,
right.
regardless of where it's situated. So that you could in theory put that tower in Lyle Park at that cost.
And one thing I do want to point out is that this estimate here is a little bit conservative, so it allows some flexibility in terms of, you'll see, if we make the tank bigger around, you can make it lower, things like that. You can maybe bury it in the ground, depending what groundwater is. The lower you go, basically, the more you try to get it out of sight, the higher the cost is. Whether it's earthwork or, diameter of the tank or whatever. So this one is hard to read here a little bit. Again, these were in the May 3rd memorandum, but what we wanted to show is this is a composite water tower, and so this is, you know, essentially, what is it, 30, I mean, I think this is a 30-year life.
50 ultimately.
Oh, 50.
Yeah.
So here you can see O&M costs, about $1.1 million, and here the ground storage reservoir, including pumping now. Because remember, you got to bring the water down, and then you got to pump it back up. Just shy of $500,000 there. So, but that's again over 50 years. So.
Since we can't see that too well, why is the overhead one so much more expensive?
This is painting.
It's painting?
Painting is expensive.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is a concrete column, which you wouldn't paint.
Right.
So if you see, you know, the ones that, so concrete columns are more kind of a newer version. If you look at all the steel fluted column ones, oh my gosh, you know, those are, you know, they're $1 million every time they paint them, you know. So
Yeah, David and I are not our heads because we both live in Eden in there.
it's a lot, yeah.
Painting $1
$1.8
million.
$1 million to paint is 1.8 total cost.
So anyways, this would just paint the steel bowl itself inside and out. And now, I think, Chad, you want to cover this part here? Sure. Here's the point.
Yeah, I just wanted to share maybe just a little bit on maybe the operational differences between an elevated tank and a ground storage tank, because there are some differences. Yes, they hold the same amount of water volume-wise, but the rate at which water goes in and out of them differs quite a bit. The way a water tower would typically operate would be pumps at the water plant turn on to fill the tank, and they turn off when the tank is full. The tank drains down as people use water. Pumps turn on and fill it again. And that the rate in which it fills and empties is going to vary depending on when people are using water. Within your community, there's a lot of water use in the early morning hours, both from irrigation in the summer as well as just people getting ready in the morning. That's when the lion's share of your water use is going to occur. So at that point in time, usually your water tank, water is going into the system from the water plant at the same rate as consumption, so the water tower level is just going to hang flat. It'll go up, it'll go down, it'll go up and go down. For a ground storage tank, we actually have to pick the times when the water is going to be going in and out manually, where the elevated tank works with gravity, the ground storage tank is going to use pumps. So we'd have to set it up to fill the tank during periods of low use, so maybe in the afternoon, later in the evening, just past midnight, you'd be filling the tank from the distribution system. And then during the periods of high demand, say from 4 a.m. on, or say 8 hours, it would be pumping into the system from the tank. So you're basically letting water in, pumping water out, letting water in and pumping it out, depending on demand in the system. Now,
I have a question for you on that. Can you do both at the same time, or can you be pumping into the storage tank and pumping out at the same time?
you can, but really they would cancel each other out.
Right.
Because you'd likely be letting it in at the same rate as pumping it out, so it'd be kind of a zero-sum game
Okay.
kind of thing there. But yeah, it would be theoretically possible. So the difference between the two is when you're filling an elevated tank, you're filling it up in the air. So you're pushing water in the system, and that water in the air is providing pressure in the distribution system. Now, if we jump to the ground storage option, and we're filling it at a much lower elevation. So we actually have to break system pressure to push water down, let water in at that elevation. So the homes around that ground storage tank, when the tank is filling, depending on the rate of fill, will experience a slightly lower water system pressure because there's water flowing that direction and flowing into the tank. Now, if you were to open that fill valve up wide open, like a fire hydrant, you'd really see a lot of pressure drop. We wouldn't expect to do that. We would want to control the flow rate to a manageable level. So maybe it's a 5 psi pressure drop or 10 psi pressure drops that wouldn't be noticeable to the average customer. So there's a little bit of I guess limitation and restriction on how you can use that tank. So when you can push water out and when you can let water in, and the rate at which you can do that. Whereas the gravity tank, elevated tank, it really just floats up and down based on what's happening in the system. It's kind of set it and forget it sort of a thing. Whereas the ground storage tank is a little more complex and requires planning and operations and things of that nature. But at the same time, it's going to provide a lot of the same benefit that an elevated tank would.
So how does that work with fire flow or for fire flow purposes then?
So it's a great question. Think about how a water tower would work if you open a hydrant. As much water as can escape that hydrant is going to come from the tower and flow to the hydrant. We would set up the ground storage tank to have a pump station that would be sensing system pressure. If you open a hydrant, all of a sudden water starts flowing out, the pressure drops. That pressure sensor would sense that, kick a pump on, start pulling water from the tank, pushing it into the system. Pressure still staying low, and turn another pump on and ramp up and keep on pushing water, providing that extra flow.
Okay, so it would be able to provide the same flow as an elevated tower?
Essentially, it would. I guess technically you could get more from a water tower, depending on where you're at. There's a lot of variables at play, but the pump station for the ground storage tank would be sized sufficiently for the fire protection needs.
So how many pumps do you put in a pump station?
Really depends on what we want to design for. A station like this, we would probably do 4 pumps. We would have 2 smaller pumps for your everyday system operation and 2 larger pumps for emergency flow, fire protection, that sort of thing.
I'm assuming they're on a generator or backup generator or something?
Yeah, that's another great point is elevated tank. We have the benefit of gravity. Ground storage tank will rely on power, so we want to have a backup generator on site to provide that flow if needed.
Does it matter where the ground storage is located? For instance, if there's a hill and it's located there, does that help at all? I mean, is that a consideration for the ground storage?
It is really, the way we looked at it was, if the site was going to work decently well for an elevated tank, it would also feasibly work well for the ground storage tank because we're really in need of big water main at an appropriate elevation. Now, if we had a higher elevation, it would be beneficial from the fact that when we're filling the tank, we're not wasting as much energy or dumping to a lower elevation and losing what we've already gained. But for all intents and purposes, looking at the sites, really they're horse piece, ground storage is the way. So this is, there's a lot going on here on this particular graph. This is a representation of what you might see on a day-to-day operation. We'll start on the bottom here. We modeled your system operating over a period of basically a week on how a ground storage tank might operate in conjunction with your existing elevated tank. So this later green line represents water level in the Kings Point Water Tower, and this darker brown line represents water level in the proposed ground storage tank. As we move along here, this is a pressure in the southwestern part of the city. It was simulated as the same hydrant that we had monitored through some other work, just to kind of get a feel for how customers' pressure might be affected by the operation of that tank when we're filling it. It's a little bit hard to read, but we're basically about 70 psi pressure, so we're on the higher end, good surface pressure. Up here represents water coming from the water plant, the flow rate. This green line here, so we're into the future, we're simulating some pretty large demands on the system. And then this first line here, this red line represents a period when we are filling the ground storage tank. And then this would be pumping from the ground storage tank into the distribution system. This is it's basically waiting to do its work. And then we start the day over again. We're filling the tank, we're pumping out of the tank, so on and so forth. The big takeaway here is we were able to simulate an operation where the two tanks work together. They're both doing their job and are working back and forth, exchanging water, holding water in reserve. So we have it available for fire protection, for emergencies, for equalization, all the things that serve the purpose of water storage. And then this light blue line represents basically customer pressure in the southwestern part of the system, under stress. So you'll see the pressure drops a bit when we're filling the tank. And then when we kick the pumps on, pressure goes back up again. And then when we start the cycle over, things balance out to where they're currently at. The next day begins, pressure goes down, pressure goes up. And so it kind of follows that streamline, and we're really operating that based on the limits of how much water we can let in and how much we can push out without excessive pressure loss or pressure gain, that sort of thing. Really, the model allows us to understand how things might operate and feasibly work by adding this new component to the water system. This is just a blow up of a single day of the very thing we were just talking about. So with that, Miles is going to get into some of the more specifics.
This is the fun part.
Mr. Jensen, could I ask a question though? So with either the water tower or the ground storage, you were talking about pressure. What do you need, and I don't know if you would know this or not, what do you need for sustained fire fighting? Do you know what is it?
Yeah, so the way water systems are rated, it really depends on the land use. So the typical residential development will need about 1,500 gallons, somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 gallons a minute of flow pulling out of the pipe, while maintaining a certain residual pressure, which the bottom end limit of what you want to see in your water system is basically 20 psi, which is well below normal service pressure. So what we're shooting for is basically a threshold of 1,500 gallons a minute to 2,500 gallon a minute range of fire flow, depending on the part of the system that we're in.
So 15 to 25, and how long? I mean, is it like 10 minutes or 20 minutes? I mean, what's what's that?
Again, that really comes down to, again, the type of house, land use, that sort of thing, but it's usually in the range of 1 to 3 hours.
Okay.
Is what the ISO recommends, insurance service office.
Okay. And
High end is 3 hours.
And either the elevated tower or the in-ground storage tank could provide that continual 3-hour, 15 to 2,500 gallons.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I have
when
a
we look at
question.
sizing the tanks, go ahead.
I did some research of my own, and I looked at the National Fire Protection Association fire flow methodologies, and they show fire flow rates of 500 to 1,000 for residential areas. They talk about fire flows up to 2,500 for commercial, which we're not having commercial in the southwestern part of the city. So, and granted, there are a lot of methodologies for figuring out fire flow. There's a lot, and so I think we need to be careful when we quote numbers like that, because this is an organization that I trust is reputable.
Yeah, it is. So there's various organizations who rate for fire flow. There's Insurance Services Office, there's NFPA. So again, it really depends on the type of structure. Actually, what the fire department wants, they may say, well, the ISO says we need 1,000. We would really like to have 1,500. It's really in the eye of the beholder. So we have to basically use a standard and run with it. Now, I will add that when we're sizing the storage tanks, the fire protection piece is an element of it, but it's not everything, so.
Yeah, I can go back to that.
Yeah, so we actually use two different methodologies for sizing the tank. Minnesota Department of Health has a recommendation that you basically want about 1 average day's worth of water use in your storage tank. And that is more of a rule of thumb to kind of cover all conditions. It covers an emergency outage, it covers equalization, operation, it covers fire protection. And then there's another calculation where we took a look at kind of those 3 components independently and added them together. We looked at keeping some water in reserve in case of an emergency or power outage, the fire protection element, and then also the equalization piece, which really accounts for making up for the difference of demand being greater than what the water plant can put out over the course of the day. But that very first graph that I showed, which showed the elevated tank need, was based on that first criteria, which is the average day requirement, which that more faint gray line behind is the more, I guess, the larger calculation than the one I was referencing. But if we just look at that average day calculation, which is the Department of Health recommendation, we're not very far off from having or exceeding the capacity of that existing water tower now.
So when you say you're not far off, what is the projection?
That's what 2019 is, if
Okay.
we keep the current pace that we've been seeing over the last few years. And that's, I'll also add, we've had some very wet years in the last few years. You know, if we have dry weather, people use more water, drives the usage up.
Right.
That sort of thing.
So what happens, let's say, so we reach this level in 2019. What happens then if we don't have a new storage facility?
It really depends on customer usage. Water storage tanks are really sized to do a couple different things. And let's say there's no new storage tanks, we keep a steady growth. Things might operate just fine in the winter months, but as we reach the summer months and there's larger days of water use, the operators might have a tough time keeping the tank full, because all the water they're making from the water plant going into the system is going to meet those demands. The water tower level is going to likely remain low. Now, it may not drain completely empty. It might take another event to do that, like a fire event. So if you had a high usage day, fire event, it lasts for a couple hours, you have the potential of basically running all the water from the tank. It's really contingent on a lot of different variables.
Okay.
Any more questions related to storage tank sizing?
So I wanted to show you some configurations of ground storage. Keep in mind that we're not exactly sure where the groundwater is, and that the floor of the tank needs to be 2 feet above the established groundwater elevation. So what I have to show you is tanks that are completely above grade, either because of water or because of their use, maybe it's on a hill, and then partially buried and buried. And these are all over the Midwest, so different architectural configurations. So here's one in Belle Plaine that's completely above grade, and then you'll see there's the little booster station that goes with it. Here's one in Rochester. Now this one here is a tall tank, and the thing about a tall tank is that they're a little bit more economical to build to some extent. They're just less concrete. And this one here, I think, may ride on the system. So this may actually act as an elevated tank. Burnsville has a few like that. Apple Valley has a few, but they're on the hill already with their ground storage reservoirs.
So you don't have a pumping station in those cases?
city of Fridley. And here is, this is one in, I think, it's on the Iron Range somewhere. This one's partially buried now. And this one, I believe, is in Shakopee.
What size tanks are we looking at?
So these all vary in size.
Do you know what that
I'm
one
gonna
is?
speculate that this one is 1 million gallons.
Okay, that's,
It feels like it's about 1 million gallons, just. Here's one in Faribault, and, I should point out, this was their first tank, and, I'm getting the construction bit, but this one was cast in place, and this one here was, it's precast, and it's wire wound, and this one here has all kinds of leaks on it, just, it's unbelievable. Makes you feel sad, actually, but this one's beautiful. This one is in a different state, I think it's Illinois, but I just wanted to show it. It's partially buried, and then, it's big. This is a 7 million gallon tank or something like that, and then there's the pump station that goes with it. This is in Maple Grove, so the water plant is over here, and so this is a 2 million gallon ground storage reservoir, and you see it's just barely exposed. This is in Savage. This is the ground storage reservoir there. I believe it's 5 million gallons. Here's the pump stations, and there's the water treatment plant. This one is in Hutchinson, and like this one, they're on a hill. So you see they kind of get nestled right into the hill.
Or walk out.
Same there. Exactly.
Walk out.
Yeah, this is a kind of parkland here. And in fact, it would be more than that shortly. Now here's some fully buried ones. This one is in South St. Paul, and there's actually 2 reservoirs there. I think there's one here, and there's one there, or something of that nature. It used to be 1, and now it became 2. And this one is Crown College. How about that, huh? So there's a tank right here. I think it's just a 300,000 gallon
I don't
tank.
think that's Crown College.
The fellow, that's what when he sent it to me, that's what he had it listed as.
There's more than one. There's more than one Crown College.
Oh, okay. Good point. Good point.
Thanks.
There you go. It's not a.
There's several.
This one is in Plymouth. This is a 7 million gallon tank that's buried. And then there's the pump station. The next photo shows the booster station with a gen set that goes with it. So there's a generator in there. There's some chemical feed, and there's some high service pumps. This one's a 7 million gallon.
How much soil do they have on the top of those tanks?
What's that?
How thick is the soil on the top of those tanks?
Probably 3 to 4 feet. I think the structural people would like to bury them because then you take thermal energy, and they weather better than the ones that are just above grade. And then here, this was at Stillwater. So how about that? There's the booster station, and then there's the tennis courts. So,
Do they ever have to do maintenance on any of those that are buried?
Not very much. This one here, I don't know if you can see it, but there's some hatches right here. And so that concrete's exposed. It may take some freeze-thaw, and it might crumble, but we're talking years and years, but otherwise, no. And as a matter of fact, even these, there's not a lot of maintenance to do on those either, But I wanted to show you the architecture on this one too. That's why I picked it. So you can put some little arches on it and pilaster kind of things to break it up so it doesn't look just like that.
You clean the inside just like you would an
Yep.
elevated one every
Yep.
once in a while, but you don't have to paint it.
Right.
That's the difference.
So,
And your access to the ones that are completely buried is through hatches?
Good hatch. Yeah.
couldn't be claustrophobic, that's for sure.
Go for the heights for the other one.
Even
Yeah.
on an elevated tank, you have hatches to access the bowl from the top of the tank.
That's
So
true.
same kind of thing with the ground storage.
Yeah, I think those are a lot more appealing to me, these ones here where you're just going down into a tank as opposed to way the heck up there.
Yeah, 200 feet.
For me personally, if I'm gonna see the top of the tank, they got to cut it down. And so I want to jump away from this and go to the central pressure analysis. Chad did a little bit of data log, he put data loggers out in the central area where it'll be connected to the south column.
Sure, I think there's, been some question of what's gonna happen when the central water system ultimately gets connected to the cell system and they become one. What's that gonna do to residents' pressures? How's that gonna affect them? So on and so forth. So we went out and we mounted a couple pressure monitors. They record system pressure every minute throughout the day. We get a feel for what's going on in the central system and also what's going on right nearby on the cell system along that new water main. So one pressure monitor was right up in this area. We tried to find a spot that was at a lower elevation in the central zone so that we could see a spot that already had high pressure. Same thing, this particular spot really represents the lowest elevation you would see on the water system, almost at lake level, while floating on the Kings Point Water Tower. It's going to be a graphical field where we're going to be situated. The other thing we're looking at on this map is estimated system pressures on the water system based on land elevation. So as you see the darker reds and browns, the darker you get equates to a higher system pressure. Lower elevation equals high system pressure. Higher elevation, lower pressure. So these greens and blues are at a lower level, whereas we're at a higher level. Really, we assume basically about the limit of the system pressure is about 95 psi, getting close to 100 if the tank is completely full. That's kind of a baseline for what we're going to look at now. Just note that one of our pressure monitors was in this dark brown red area, and then the other one was a little bit further up the hill, so a little bit lower pressure. So this graph represents the results of what we monitored for system pressure. This top flat orange line, which is right at about 95 psi, is floating on the Kings Point Water Tower. So this represents the south water system at a low elevation. And this also would represent what we would expect to be the highest pressure you would see in the water system, in the cell system based on the water tower hydraulics. This green line that constantly goes up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, is in the central water system. And the reason you see such a vast difference in pressure variation between the south and the central is the cell system's floating on a water tower, so that's maintaining the system pressure. Tank fills, tank empties, tank fills, empties, so on and so forth. So there's very little pressure variation in that system due to the water tower. The central system operates on a hydrodynamic tank, which is a small 3,000 gallon tank that's made up of air and water, much like you'd see in a rural residential home that's operating on a well, where the well pump kicks on, pressure goes up till it reaches the stop limit, shuts off, water comes out of the tank to feed system demand, at which point it reaches a low limit and the pumps kick on again, and that cycle continues throughout the day. This is a single day's worth of time. You can see in the central zone how many times those pumps kick on and off, and how much the pressure bounces at that particular location from over 100 psi down to 70. So there's a 30 psi bounce in the central zone because of the operation of that particular hydrodynamic tank. Now, if that valve was opened up between the two systems, so now we're connected the central system to the south system. This dotted line represents the resulting system pressure at that location that we monitor. Now, we would see higher pressures at lower elevations, much like this orange line, which we're already seeing in the cell system. But you see, though we're going to be operating things differently and floating on a new pressure source, i.e. the water tower, we're going to see a flatter pressure at roughly in this location. We were just at about 80, 85 psi. So much less variability in the pressure on an hourly basis versus going up and down, up and down. Really, we went through this exercise to prove to ourselves that if that valve is opened, the two systems are connected, that the residents won't be seeing excessively high pressure to what they're currently seeing, and that they'll be sustainable and actually would be a benefit, I believe, to those users to be floating on the water tower at a more constant pressure.
So what you're saying is there's no pressure reducing valve needed?
That would be my thought there.
Mm-hmm.
Really, if we go back to this map and we think about what's already going on in the cell system, if we go to the far east side of this peninsula here, you see that darker red area, we already see pressures in the 90 to 100 psi range out in this area. We're going to see that up in here. So really, the elevation range and service pressure variability is going to be nearly identical in the central zone. So
Goodness.
the lake levels really represents kind of the lowest elevation you would see for a water service. And the land is going to follow the lake elevation, so we can't get lower than the lake. This last one here is really, again, just kind of the same representation of the two different systems. So if we were to think about that hydrodynamic tank in the central zone being a water tower, and what those water tower levels would look like going up and down compared to the Kings Point water tower, that's kind of the net result there. So you'll see the water tower provides us a flatter, more consistent system pressure, whereas if the hydrodynamic tank level was translated to a water tower, you would be seeing 60 feet of variability in one of those, going up and down on a minute by minute basis almost. So I guess with that, that's the extent of what I have to say.
Okay.
I think that kind of finishes up my May 7th discussion a little bit. And I think that if there were a next step relative to Lyle Park ground storage reservoir, I think a soil boring would be kind of in order to reduce some of the speculation on where can we put this, what elevation. I think that would be the most logical next step. I think that's all we have. If there's any questions.
Any other questions?
I do. And I really appreciate the analysis of the pressure analysis and the understanding the difference between the towers and the ground, and that's been really helpful. From what I understand, there's two reasons for needing additional storage. One, we talked about a year ago, and that was fire flow. And part of this analysis was testing those flow hydrants in Hunter's Crest. And we were under the impression a year ago that those flow hydrants that water flow was about 500 gallons per minute. And with this analysis, it's come back and it's shown that it's almost double that. It's 1,000 to 1,200 is what the report said. So the urgency that we were feeling a year ago for this water tower I was hearing was based primarily on fire suppression in Hunter's Crest. So that urgency doesn't seem to be there any longer based on, because that was the primary reason that we were hearing was why we needed the water storage. The second reason, obviously, is population growth in the city. And if that population growth materializes, I agree we're going to need a water tower sooner or later, but I think the urgency of it, I think the question is when do we need to do this? Because when we were talking about the comp plan a year ago, I was hearing that for population growth, the need really didn't come into play until 2030 is what we were talking about back then. So combined with the fact that the fire flow gallons per minute is double what we thought, that sort of takes away the urgency of it. So and maybe this is a conversation just with the council, it doesn't.
Well, I think part of that conversation should probably, so Paul, in just a second, also include the fire departments, because last year I sat in a meeting and the fire chief from St. Bonnie very clearly said, if you do anything, you need to provide more better water pressure in that area. I mean, he was very, very direct about that need. Now, I'm not sure where he was getting his information from, but that might be a conversation that we should have with our fire department.
And I have had a conversation with Chief Weber about that.
Right.
And this was several months back. It was probably last fall. They had a fire call in Hunter's Crest, and they came back, and that's when I requested that the hydrants be tested, because their firefighters were saying the flow rate seemed a lot higher than 500 gallons per minute. That's why I requested the flow rate be tested. So they were surprised at how much the flow rate was.
Paul, did you want to say something?
A couple of items. I think there's two things going on here. The 2030 was the firm capacity, and that's based on the number of wells you have in operating and keeping up with your average day demand in miles. And Chad can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know where 500 gallons per minute came from. It's not something we stated. And then we did the study that showed, I think it was higher than that. But typically what you do in a fire flow in a residential area like that, when this house spacing that you have is 750 gallons per minute off of 2 separate hydrants. So you have 1,500 gallons per minute, and you are short of that. So in the Hunter's Crest area, I think that's what SEH also, the miles and Chad have shown.
I disagree. I heard the 500 gallons per minute here.
Oh, you didn't hear that
on
from me.
a number of occasions. And Chief Weber heard it too, because that's why he was questioning the flow rate in Hunter's Crest.
Well, again, that's a conversation we can have with the chief again. We've had some testing done, but I think the question is, and that's kind of why I was asking the sustainable rate is, can it be sustained for 3 hours at 1,500? I mean,
I think that's kind of they're sort of related, but that's a key point. If you go back to this figure here, where a way of sizing the tank, you have your the equalization that Chad spoke about. So this is the difference between what's being used and what you can put into the tank. It's going to fluctuate. Then you need the 3 hour fire volume here, and then this is just represents you're going to need a little bit extra, or potential for a little bit extra. But as the community grows in population, you chip away at what's available in the fire. What becomes here, you're chipping away from because you're using more of it for equalization. And so these calculations, whether it's just your average day demand, or whether it's the average day demand here, or the more sophisticated calculation, but this includes the volume of water for 3 hour fire flow. I mean, it's all in that May 3rd memo.
I thought it was 2 hours.
Plus, is that what it is? It's 2 hours? I thought it was.
It's 2 hours in your report.
It's 2.
Yeah, 2 for residential.
2. And then the amount of demand from the expected population increase. And I think this was just based off of what the planning is doing. So you could be right. I mean, if it just flatlines right here, you don't need anything. I'm not sure that I stand here and tell you that that's what's going
And
on.
I'm not questioning that we're gonna need
So
it
you might
someday.
be speculating, you know, on a year or two of difference before you start to chip away at that amount of, you know, fire protection that's there. And then that's just a roll of the dice.
And well, the other question then, typically from start to finish, I suppose it would vary depending on whether it's in ground or whether it's a tower. But from start to finish, how long does it take to get something started, built, and then online? Is that a year? Is it 2 years?
So I would estimate 2 years. And in fact, I think that you'll be able to get a ground storage reservoir system designed and built and operable before you would an elevated tank, because where we live, you only have a certain number of months where you can paint.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I know you've been driving around the community in the wintertime and you look and you see that onion in the sky. It's because they ran out of time, couldn't paint, gonna have to wait 6 months, or in our case 7, right? Until you can come back around and paint again. So.
And it's really hard to tell from here on that side. So what is the projected population in 2019?
You have to get
I mean,
that.
what's-
Can you see it on the chart there?
We had that on the chart itself. It was based on building permits.
Oh, okay.
I went out. and
Okay,
studied,
so-
you know,
Oh, okay.
I'm just wondering how close we are to the projections.
It's like the graph's showing the gallons on the year, so it's based on the
Oh,
actual
it's
usage now, and
gallons.
then projecting based on how much more we'll need based on growth.
Okay.
One thing that's kind of interesting in the analysis that Miles and Chad have done is that what they're seeing in their analysis, Public Works is seeing in the field. So for instance, initially there were going to be 3 water plants and an elevated tank as part of that, and it was decided to put in 2 just to meet the capacity the city needed. Well, what's happening now is we're in a position where well 3, and I don't think 4 is kicking on, but they're getting a lot of use out of well 3. And there are some days when they're having trouble keeping up. So well 3 is a backup well, so is well number 5. So they would back up, but those distribute water directly to the system, and so it's not treated.
It's not treated.
So you're getting blended water, but you're getting more water. You know, the people who are in the areas of those wells are getting less treated water than they would.
Mm-hmm. So that's the other, if you will, issue.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
your question, which year was it?
Well, I'm just, you're saying that we're going to be out of capacity, not out of capacity, but it's going to start reaching into that fire capacities in 2019. So that's what I was wondering. What are those projections?
So I'll encourage you to look in the appendix of that May 3rd
Okay.
memo, table A3, A as in Apple. You'll see the spreadsheet of average daily demand, and then it's broken out per the different zones. And the demand, the way I think I'm seeing here, max day in 2019 is 1.25 million. Average day 418,000, and that's just the regular usage part. So there's a whole table in there.
Okay, I'll take a look at
that goes
that.
to that.
Okay.
I think we also need to keep in mind that the figures that have been calculated in this report are based on 1,500 gallons per minute for 2 years, and those are on the high end.
I think that's where we should talk with the fire department,
Yeah,
fire departments.
and I
Give their
tried to get
recommendation.
hold of Chief Weber, but he just has been out of the country. He just
Yeah.
got back today, so.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, good point. So Chad was pointing out that calculation is this line. Just the straight up average day demand based on populations and, previous usages.
Right. Okay.
I guess I don't know where, I guess the conversation is necessarily going to, but as Paul Hornby pointed out, it might be beneficial to hear from Gary and Mike about what they're seeing on
Sure.
a daily basis
Mhm.
too, about
Yep.
what the pumps and such, and you know, Paul, you're telling it well, but I've heard on a daily basis more so from Gary and Mike about the issues that they're seeing in the field that I think might be helpful for you all to hear as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Good idea. Yep.
As addition to the fire
Yeah.
chiefs, because
Yep.
we've heard Mr. Weber at the front desk asking for a water tower.
And
recently.
we sat in a meeting, we sat in a
With that A
meeting,
month or so
Yeah.
ago. So I guess
And-
I don't know what,
Right.
I don't know.
right. No, we sat in a meeting a couple months back. November, September, I don't, anyway, where he said the same thing, so,
Maybe just getting some more of the stakeholders in here.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Talking basically,
Yeah.
things, whether it's at a work session
Exactly.
next month or whatever, or something. So.
right. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming. Any other questions then? Otherwise,
So in looking at this here, we've got kind of two options, two site options. I think from what I'm implicitly seeing here is, are we ruling out a tower at Lyle Park?
I think it's going to be tough to do something above ground. Is that maybe being too?
No, I think you're correct. That's my take. We tried once in the Hunter's Crest neighborhood with a tower, albeit in a different location, but it was actually not all that close to residents, but they felt like it was way too close, way too big, way too
Well,
close.
but
The
I
park
think-
is like right next to everybody.
Well, but to clarify a little bit, what we were hearing from that was that it was in an area that was, they were looking out over a wetland and they didn't see any, thing that was not natural, let's put it that way. In a park, it's different. Well, that park, it's not a natural park, it's full of amenities that are
Sure.
man-made. So I think the concern was it was destroying the sightline.
Yeah.
Whereas, because, okay, you've got a swamp or a wetland or the woods or whatever, and there's a tower sticking right in the middle of it, and that was the concern.
Right.
Here, the sightline is different, and you're not looking at what I will say a pristine view interrupted by a water tower. Here, you're looking at part of a development anyhow. And so I think it might be a little bit different conversation because of that.
Potentially, but I do remember that not that long ago, there was a project approved for that same area. So instead of looking at a stick water tower, I think we look at a lot of buildings. So
Right, and I asked that specific question at that hearing. It's like, well, do you want to look at a water tower or do you want to look at development? And I got the answer loud and clear, much to my surprise, that they want to look at a development. So that's what they've got.
yes,
Now,
they do.
And, okay, that
Yeah.
wouldn't be my choice, but I
Right.
spoke and we listened.
Right.
But I think this is a different question now. It's not just, it's water tower, it's a matter of where specifically the water tower is. And that was, the issue was right there. Now, in the park.
well, I think that there's a lot of people opposed to having a water tower in the park, period. So I think if it's going to be that site, the least obtrusive that you can make it, the better.
But we don't know what the water table level
Right.
is there, right? So we don't know how far down
Right,
we could put it. Might still all be above ground.
right.
Right, then you kind of lose the advantage because then you still have to do
Right,
maintenance on it,
right.
some maintenance.
Well, yeah.
So I guess I'm not totally sold on the fact that it has to be underground in Lyle Park. I think we still need to evaluate having a tower there. I mean, we may come to a different conclusion, but I personally am not ready to rule that out.
I'm not either. I think we could go either way.
Well, we don't have to make that decision
No.
tonight.
But I just want,
so-
in the context of, last time we talked about 5 options, now, per direction, we kind of narrowed it down to 2. And I will agree 2 site options, but I think we can do some variable, there may be a tower on one of those sites rather than underground storage.
Well, my guess is that County Road 92, Mud Lake, that would probably be a tower.
Yeah.
That way. So kind of got 3 options. Tower
Right,
or
Right, right.
Right,
Non-tower, line or tower.
right. I would say that's correct.
Okay, so our next conversation is going to be with Gary in Public Works and Fire Chiefs, and then we'll go from there. Because then make a determination how soon we need to do this? Is it next year? Is it this year?
Yeah, one of the things I think Miles touched upon was the soil borings. I mean, we could do that if, I don't think that's gonna be bad money not well spent. Because if you do end up with the underground option, you're gonna do it one way or the other.
Well, you'd have to do it regardless.
Regardless, right?
Tower
If
or
the tower's in
underground.
line of park, you're gonna have to figure out where in line of park and then do the soil borings there.
Right.
We want to wait until we have Lab Park nailed down as the site, and we've told her ruled out. Otherwise, we're going to do salt boring with both.
Potentially, yeah. If that's the pleasure of the council, we can certainly do that.
Seems like it would be money wasted.
Well, let's have a conversation first with Gary and Public Works and Fire. So,
So relative to the conversation, if you want us to modify the parameters for hours of firefighting and flows,
I think we
that
can.
would adjust that,
Yeah.
just let us know.
Okay.
I mean, they're simple number adjustments.
Okay.
It's just an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. All right. So next we have our public safety annual report summary. Mr. Falls, Chief.
All right, Madam Mayor, members of the council, this is, as stated, just a summary of the 2017 annual report, which is a document that you have already seen and is available in its entirety on our city website if people wish to go there. So I'll be fairly brief. If you have questions, feel free to interrupt at any moment. I always like to just point out, since this is for the public, that our mission statement is to fight crime and promote safety, and all that we do in public safety certainly fits within that mission. So with that, I'll continue on here. 2017 was a busy year. As you know, we've had a lot of growth, and I think we're starting to see a lot of the numbers are starting to indicate that on a very consistent basis. And so with that, there were 6,257 incident complaint reports in 2017, which is an increase over 2016. Fairly significant increase. Put my glasses on to see the actual numbers here. 6,257 compared to 5,761. So we're starting to see more activity with more population and more traffic through our city. It averages out to roughly 17 incidents per day. So that's a lot of activity. All right, tickets issued. Total for 2017 was 2,735. When I say tickets, that includes both warnings and citations. You can see the numbers there. Again, a significant increase over 2016. Averages out to over 7 tickets per day. So that's, well, I'll come back to that. I'll move ahead to the next slide. Traffic crashes, this is an area that we don't like to see the trend going in this direction. This is up significantly, over 21%. So in 2017, there were a total of 184 crashes, which included 1 fatal crash on Highway 7, 21 personal injury crashes, 42 animal-involved crashes. We tend to see a lot of those given our fairly rural area here. 103 property damage crashes and 17 vehicle off-the-road crashes. So that's up significantly as well. One of the things we do, and I'm just going to go back a slide, one of the reasons that traffic enforcement is so important is not only visibility, but also to correct unsafe driving behavior, because our goal here is to correct that behavior before it gets to the level of a crash. And so despite our efforts, the numbers are trending upward as we get more population and more traffic through our area. So one of the ways that we combat that is through traffic enforcement and high visibility. And so I'm confident that these numbers would be much higher if we didn't go to the lengths that we do in the area of traffic enforcement. So arrests are up as well. You'll see that In 2017, there were 113 adults arrested as compared to 96 the year before. And more, I guess, importantly or alarmingly, I guess, 42 juveniles were arrested in 2017 as compared to only 16 in 2016. So this is an area, again, that we're starting to see a pretty significant increase. And not just on the lower level stuff either. We're starting to see some more serious types of crimes that juveniles have been involved in. And so that's, again, not a good trend, but certainly something we are monitoring and doing everything we can to address that issue. We work very closely with the school and our school resource officer to address these issues and do everything we can to educate and work on the prevention side of things as well. Criminal investigations, no surprise, this is up as well. There were 153 Part 1 crimes, which are the most serious level crimes, 350 Part 2 crimes, which are serious but not quite as serious, for a total of 503. That number is up drastically, 28%, over 28% over 2016. This is one of the this is the primary reason we added a detective position in very early 2017 to address this issue right here. As I mentioned in the past, I won't go into a lot of detail now, but a lot of these criminal investigations take a lot of staff time and are very staff intensive, just due to technology and all kinds of other issues that we face today. It's not as simple as getting one single search warrant like we did years ago. Now every piece of electronic evidence or device, such as cell phones, computers, cars, houses, are all separate warrants and things like that. So very staff intensive. With that said, we still have or maintain a clearance rate, a criminal clearance rate of 69%, which is a number I'm very proud of. Our staff does an excellent job at investigating and clearing out cases. The state average is about 50%. And when I say Hennepin County, that's all the cities averaged that are in Hennepin County. The average is about 41%. Certainly some of the large agencies with very, very high numbers of retail crimes and things like that are difficult to clear tend to trend that number downward because it's just sheer volume. But nonetheless, I think our clearance rate is very, very good. So, Drug Task Force, we added this position in late 2016 as we see a lot of activity in the area of narcotics. This is just a snapshot of what the activity was this is our task force alone, and there are several across the metro. So this just is for our West Metro Drug Task Force. There were 122 search warrants executed, 79 arrests, 61 state and federal charges, and then the substances seized were marijuana, 58 pounds, cocaine, 2 pounds, methamphetamine, 50 pounds, heroin, 2 pounds, and there were 19 firearms seized. So that's a lot of good work by a task force in 2017, and we're starting to see 2018 is trending even a little bit higher than this. But,
And Chief, that's not just for Minnetrista, that's for the western area.
That's correct. This is for the entire West Metro
Yep.
Drug Task Force,
Yep.
which is a culmination of 5 agencies,
Okay.
which we're part of.
Yep.
But typically this is kind of West Metro. And Lake Minnetonka SWAT team, as you know, we've been part of since 2006. People often ask, how many times do you get called out? And so in 2017, there were 2 full call-outs. In other words, the entire team was paged, came together, and responded to an incident, which seems relatively low. The number that's probably more important, and we don't really track it very well, we're looking at ways to do a better job of tracking the second piece that I'll mention, is how many incidents were resolved without the need for a full call-out. Because at any given time, again, we're part of it's a culmination of agencies in the lake area, 5 to be exact. We're part of that. And at any given time, most of our agencies have several SWAT team members that are working in their daily assignments. So most of them are in patrol, some are detectives. One of ours is SRO. And so a lot of these incidents are resolved with the staff that's already working without the need for a full call-out. If this SWAT team were not to exist, that wouldn't be happening, and we would probably have to call someone else's SWAT team or find another way to handle it. So that's a very good thing. I think that's just a testament to the staff that's part of this team and what they're able to do as a result of the extra training that they receive every year. Permits, about the only thing in this annual report that is trending down a little bit is handgun permits. We went from 95, or we had 95 in 2017 as compared to 108 in 2016. This number typically does fluctuate up and down based on trends and perceptions, so on and so forth. Special event permits were up considerably. In 2017, we had 10 special event permits for things like bike rides, bike races, large events, as compared to 5 in 2016. So that number's up. Our city is a beautiful city. We have a lot of open space, and so it makes it very attractive to have these special events. So we're starting to see more and more of those. And it is time consuming to manage all of that, but staff has managed to keep up with that. Response time analysis, all the way to the left is the priority one calls. That's really the one where that we want to, I guess, address or pay closest attention to, because the priority one calls are things where it's a true emergency, where people need help now. Those are things like medicals, accidents with injuries, in progress crimes. And so our average response time is just over 7.5 minutes. And so that's a number that I would like to see go down. Typically in cities that are divided into zones, you'll see that number start to come down. In cities like ours, where we have very few staff on at certain times a day, that number tends to be about where it is. Simply because if you're in Hunter's Crest and you get a call on Minneapolis Avenue, it takes a long time to get there. If it's 3 in the morning, probably not 7 minutes. If it's 3 in the afternoon, it's probably going to take longer than that because of traffic. So one of the things we do when we look at staffing is we look at this piece. And as we continue to grow and add additional staffing, then we can start to look at cutting our city into zones. For us, the logical step would be 2 zones, a north and a south, and then you keep cars in both. They can certainly leave to assist the other, but what that does is it starts to dramatically cut down response times. We can't begin to do that entirely until we have enough staff where you have a minimum of 2 cars on at any given time. When we have multiple cars on, we already do this informally, but we do this. So, but that, given our area of 33 square miles and the fact that our population is really dense kind of in the south and southwest corners and the north and northeast corners, that's a challenge that really we have to face, and this is very typical of that type of setup. So we do monitor that, and we'll continue to do everything we can to address that as we continue to grow and look at staffing. And then as far as the other priorities, especially 3 and 4, those are report calls. To have the average response time to that be in that 10-minute range, I think that's a very, very good response time. That means most of the time an officer is available to take whatever the report or concern is and address it relatively quickly.
Is there any stats on priority 1, the time has caused issues? I mean, where if we had been there quicker, things might have not gotten as bad as they did, or?
That's a very good question. That would be very, very useful data. Most of that isn't necessarily tracked. I can tell you that nothing stands out. I can't think of something that's painfully obvious. Fortunately, a lot of the in-progress crimes and things are, we haven't had a ton of serious ones, but a lot of those are medicals and crashes, right. And it's really hard to determine, well, if I got here 30 seconds earlier, what would the outcome have been? Right. There's all kinds of statistical data that talks about specific types of conditions or incidents. For example, if someone's not breathing, well, we know you have 4 to 6 minutes before the brain starts to die. So we want to get there faster than that is the goal. But as far as specific data about our calls and what happened or didn't happen, no, we don't have any statistical data there.
Do we compare ourselves against the other semi-rural cities out here on the west side?
We do. And the challenge there is you have to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples and you're
Right.
tracking your data the same way.
Yep.
One of the beauties of the records management system that we have, and also being part of the same dispatch system, Hennepin County Dispatch also dispatches for other agencies. So we can compare it that way. So with that said, we are absolutely in the ballpark for our size and type of agency.
Okay,
So
thanks.
very good question.
Right.
Next is commendations. In 2017, we issued 20 commendations for outstanding work. I'll just say that these aren't just given out because someone did a nice job on something. They're given out for what I would say is excellent work. So there were a lot of things. 2017, as you've seen already, was a very busy year. We had a number of very complex cases that came to very, outstanding conclusions as the result of very, very good work. Police work on not just the detective level, but all levels, from our secretarial staff all the way to the SRO, to detectives and patrol. So I'm very proud of that. There were 16 commendation awards, 3 awards of excellence, and 1 meritorious service award. So I guess I'd like to thank our staff. I think they do an excellent job, and they're very dedicated to what they do. And I think that shows in the results that we're getting. Volunteer reserve officers, I won't go too much into detail here. We only currently have 2 or 3 active reserve officers. As you've heard, even with the fire departments, it's becoming increasingly difficult to find people that want to volunteer a fair amount of time. There's a lot of training and time commitment requirements that go along with these positions. And so over the years, we have lost a number of people because they're just too busy to donate. So we are looking at new ways to attract additional reserves. The reserves we have are very dedicated, and we're very thankful for them. And they have donated a lot of time. And so we are always looking for new volunteers to join our reserve program. So with that, again, that's a pretty quick summary. The entire report is available on the city website, but I stand for questions if you have any.
Thank you for that. That's nice to have and nice to share with the public as well. So thank you, Chief. So with that, we'll move on to persons to be heard. We have nobody listed. Consent agenda items then are approve our work session meeting minutes from June 4th, 2018, approve our regular meeting minutes from June 4th, 2018, approve the claims, approve a step increase for Randy Storms, our public works maintenance worker, and approve a 1-year probation completion for Mark Klein, also public works maintenance worker, and approve an agreement and waiver of claims for Harry Stillwell at 970 Maple Crest Drive, and authorize ad for bids for the 2018 Mill and Overlay project for City Projects 2-18. Is there a motion to approve consent agenda items as presented, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Ms. Mortenson made that motion and Ms. Bruce seconded that to approve consent agenda items A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Any further questions? Hearing none. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. So we'll move on to our business items. This is first item is a change order for Halstead Drive. Is that Mr. Hornby?
That is me, yes. Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. In your packet is a request for council to approve change order number 2. It's presented as a work order in a MnDOT fashion for their approval. The city had previously approved change order number 1, and that was with various items that reduced the contract amount by $34,000, $34,004.70. And most of that was done to resize the number of culverts and and reducing the contract from Farm Hill Circle was removed from the project because it had been reconstructed as part of the water main improvements that were done with the water system improvements. And then we had some additional traffic control. That was change order number 1. Change order 2 includes a number of items that we've actually been working on the contractor for quite some time. There's still some items that are not on here because we don't agree on what those changes should be or what they are. One of those would be topsoil. There literally is no topsoil on the site that you can salvage and reuse. So that's something that would probably be coming up for discussion both with staff and the council in the future change order. But change order 2 does adjust some quantities that are identified in the plan as planned quantity. And typically we do that with a lot of the earthwork quantities, common excavation, subgrade excavation, borrow materials, and we actually also did it with aggregate base class 5. We also removed a 51-inch arch culvert and we replaced it with a 42-inch round steel pipe. And we did that as part of one of the comments from the watershed district, is because part of that is that you had to show that you weren't increasing rate through the culvert from from a tributary to Lake Minnetonka to a backwater. If you increase the flow rate, you could potentially increase the elevation of the lake, and you had to show that you weren't affecting the floodplain for every property along the lake, which is a large task. So we made adjustments to engineer our way around that. So we put a 42-inch steel pipe in its place. That's what we replaced initially. And then there's a retaining wall for a driveway for 7515 Halstead Drive, and that was with a easement item. The amount that we have in the change order, I think, is going to be a lot less because they didn't need to put in as much wall as it was identified as. So the change order would increase the contract $14,866.61. So it increases the contract from $2.43 million to $2.44 million, roughly. That's just not the exact amounts, but that's the rough number. The exact amount is in the fiscal impact portion. That is still below the amount that was originally bid for the contract. There is a resolution in your packet that you could approve to approve work order number 2, and then the work order itself signed by has been signed by the contractor. And a copy of the work order is in your packet as well.
Okay, questions?
So if there's still outstanding items, can you explain the logic for having this one at this point?
Contractor is really trying to put the heat on us, saying that we're stalling the project, which we are not. They were to provide a number of items to us for this work order, and there's items they are not providing us. And so, in an effort to try to get them out on the project, I ran this change order through. So that's the purpose of doing it now. They are stalling, purposely delaying the project, in my opinion, and it's not because of me or WSB. There's a utility relocation going on the project right now. It does not interfere with their ability to do the work, in my opinion. They could have been out there. They could have been out there for a month, and they haven't been. And this has been a real issue. And we're going to have some more conversation about this tomorrow, I think, with the management staff. Completion date is still June 30th. This work order does not change that date. I put them on notice on Friday that we will look at liquidated damages as well.
Okay.
But they are going to come back with other claims, just so we all know that the project is about 2/3 of the way done.
Okay. All right. Other questions? Comments? Otherwise, staff is recommending adopting a resolution approving the work order for the Halstead Drive Improvement Project.
So this feels like ransom.
Well, the work has been done. I mean, they're not asking, this change already had a number of things on it that were agency required or adjustments in units that were needed for the project. So it's not ransom. What's the ransom is that they're not coming to work until, and it's been one thing after another. Well, we have to get this done. Well, we have to get this done. By the contract, they're supposed to continue to progress work.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, they're almost in default to the contract, but that's part of the discussion I need to have with staff and with our city attorney.
So I hear your concern, but I think as much as I'm sure none of us are happy about it. This is just one obstacle to take off the table for discussion.
That's
Like-
what it is, yes.
By getting it out of the way, it's one less excuse they have to point to us.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
yes.
So,
Yeah.
So I thought what I was trying to do is remove those barriers and
Right.
get this through.
I get
Get them back on the job. I know they're gonna come back and say there's a utility delay. In my opinion, there's no utility delay. There's no reason for them not to be out there working.
Who's responsible for the utilities?
So we notify, during design, we have a notification of all the utilities that they have an issue. We have one utility that showed and marked their utility out near the right-of-way line. Well, it wasn't there, it was right down the eastbound lane for almost the entire length of the project. So the first dig of the project, or before they even made any excavation, it was marked properly at that time. So that had to be relocated. That company came right out and relocated. I think it delayed the project 2 weeks. I think the contractor came back after 3. That would have affected substantial completion, which pushed them late last year, and the project got paved. So now I think the same utility company is now putting that utility in its permanent location. And they've been out there working, but they've only got one crew, and they haven't been in an area, in multiple areas where you would see a need for this contractor not to be in there, because they could be working in areas where this utility company is not working. And there is a utility coordination item in the project where the contractor is responsible to coordinate those schedules.
So you said the completion looks still like the 30th of June?
Well, we haven't changed that by change order, nor has the council. We haven't recommended the council do that either.
What's the penalty?
$500 a day.
But he just said it's 2/3 done, June 30th. We're on
It's
June-
not gonna be done by June 30th.
So, yeah, he just told me it's not gonna be done by June 30th. So,
I can't see how it's gonna be done by that timeframe.
more to come on this one.
Okay. And there will be another work order that will come to the council. Part of it will be topsoil. There might be some other items on there as well that, or a contractor claim to deal with.
So they're going to be more apt to do the work if we pay this, or are they going to be more apt to do the work if we say, do the work and then we'll pay you?
Well, they've already done the work.
Okay.
We aren't paying them until it's approved by the council and comes up to the next opportunity, which would be July for payment.
Yeah.
We met in February and couldn't agree on a number of items, and this work order formalizes a number of them. But it got to this point to get that formalized.
Okay.
There's a number of things I've been asking for and I have not received. So I put this together just to try to remove that the barrier to getting them back out on the site.
All right.
So when you work with somebody like this, do you report this kind of activity to the Better Business Bureau or something of contractors? I mean,
No, I think that contractors rely on good references and on the work they've done. So, it's kind of self-policing.
so when we get contracts, you guys ask for the referrals, right? You call
Yes,
to
we
get
do.
referrals.
Yes, we do.
So on this one just had good referrals, obviously, but
This was a startup company, but the referrals came from past work of the people who were running the project. And, I sent out a letter. I don't want to get into a lot of detail, but I did send a letter out because we were concerned as a staff and certainly from an engineering standpoint that they did not have enough people on the project to get it done. Well, they did. If they were to really argue within a week and a half, I would say they met their substantial completion date in 2017. Final completion date, I don't see how they're going to meet it. They're going to have to put an army of people and equipment on it to get it done by that time frame.
So is this our first use of this company?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
our last.
And the last. Yeah, live
So-
and learn.
Mr. Hornby's frustrated, city staff is frustrated,
Yeah.
residents are frustrated, they've been calling. We understand that. But we're just in a point now where we're just trying to make the best that we can of what we got and then move on. I've had residents, and I think council members may have it in the past, say, why did we pick these guys? Well, you don't
They
have
were
to pick
the
the low bidder.
lowest,
You
but-
don't have to pick the
Mhm.
low bidder. as Mr. Batty always says, that you have to pick the lowest responsible bidder. That's why we did the due diligence. We did bring that to the council, so I think we have enough information that staff they're gonna use knows what they're doing. I've heard from a couple of different residents, why did you hire this group? And it's like, well, I explained to them that, you know, we did our due diligence, this is what we got. Might not have been as right as we had liked it to be, but nonetheless, we did look. But the other thing is, in this community especially, if we would have selected the second one or the third one at $100,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 higher, then the question is, why are you picking them? So, you know, that's the responsible piece of that.
Right.
Mhm.
And so we thought this was gonna be responsible. Obviously,
Okay.
it's not turned out that way, but
And there's, I will add, there's no guarantee that even if you spent a couple $100,000 more, you wouldn't have this problem.
you got it. And
Mhm.
so I think Paul had a inkling about the group that came in second as not being as reliable. So we were actually looking at probably the third, if there was a third. I think there was a third. So, you know, I mean, it's substantial money, so we don't like to sit there and just throw out a couple extra $100,000 because we know they're really good. When you think you've done enough work and you find out, you think they are and they're not, so.
Right.
So this has been a
Okay.
frustrating project all the way around. I think we'll get to the end, it's just, I don't know how yet, but I think we'll get to the end, so. My goal is to get it done, and I think everybody on staff, including Mr. Hornby, is interested in just seeing it finish. I sure know the residents would like to see it done.
You know, we've had our staff scheduled and ready to go for this project to start when the frost is out, and I've had to redirect that staff now. So now that's always the juggle to get people back.
Yeah, right.
And we've dealt with some concerns from residents on our own, and done some of the work on our own, but we've logged that time, and we're gonna build this company. So we've got a few people saying, I can't even get in and out of my property because of the new curb or whatever, there's a big dip and they haven't filled it or whatever. We've done that for people, but we've tracked that time in order to make sure that they eventually pay for it, and just to satisfy our residents, so.
And some of those things I'm still hanging on to because that's another part of some of these other items are outstanding, that's where that comes into play. And I haven't, some of the information I was looking for pertain to some items that are related to the things the Public Works have been able to do, so.
All right.
So,
All right. Well, thank you for that update and for those, that information. So, Council, what is your pleasure?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, motion is made and seconded to take staff's recommendation and approve the work order number 2 for Halstead Drive. That was Mr. Molitor that made the motion, Ms. Bruce that made the second. Any further question or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. So next we have receive bids and award the contract for the 2018 crack fill and seal coat project. Mr. Hornby.
Mayor and members of the council, as you are aware, we do work with a joint project with the cities of Shorewood and Victoria. And City of Shorewood actually is the one who hosts that project and the bids. They've already opened bids, and each community would then be responsible for the contract and the payment of the schedule pertaining to the city, to their particular city. Bids were received, and the overall information is in your packet. The important part is the city of Minnetrista, we had 2 schedules with 2 alternatives, Schedule D and E. The total contract with alternatives came in at $106,841. Our budget is much less than that. So from the capital improvement plan, the city has a budget of $78,087, which also includes the indirect costs. So the budget you have to work with from a construction standpoint, about $71,600. In order to get the project within budget, what we recommend doing, and part of this is going back and taking another look at the roadways with Gary. Windridge Trail, we were looking at doing some patching on that roadway and then seal coating it. It appears that the winter was pretty hard on that roadway, and there's a lot of patching would have to occur on that. So we're recommending to remove that from the project. That saves about $12,000. Removing Fairway Ridge Court and Fairway Ridge Drive would remove about $7,900 from the project. That's a road that was recently milled and overlaid, but we think we can let that go for another year, maybe two, before we seal coat it. Remove the pavement markings. The pavement markings came in exceptionally high. I don't know why, but I think Gary can, through Public Works and his vendor, can get a much better price on that. We would reject alternate number 1 for the roadway, which would be a fog seal. That's take $16,000 out of that. And then we would recommend to include the crack fill and seal coat and the fog seal for the trail work. That would bring the recommendations that we're looking at for the construction loan would bring that down to $69,400. That does include a 5% construction contingency for unknowns. Typically in a seal coat there isn't. The unknowns are measurement, really is what it comes down to. So there is a resolution in your packet that would award the contract to the low bidder, which would be Allied Blacktop Company, but with the recommendations made by staff as stated, removal of Wind Ridge Trail, the Fairway Ridge Court, Fairway Ridge Drive, the pavement markings, and the roadway fog seal. And that amount would be, the award amount would be $68,131.
Okay, questions? Any reason why it came in so high?
It looks like it came in, we typically would estimate these projects at around $2 a square yard just for the crack fill and seal coat work. Came in at $2.10, and that was actually construction. We're looking at $2 a square yard with all project costs. And it's kind of hard to tell from the 2 bids we received. Both contractors have done work in the city before, but they're both playing some funny numbers on some of the bids. I think one of them came in with the oil at 5 cents a gallon, and then came in really high on the aggregate. Don't know the reason for that, other than I think that contractor had hauled in some rock last year that was not virgin material, virgin washed material. It was used material, so we had them haul it all back out and haul in virgin material. That might be one reason for it. But the other one was high on both, so it's unfortunate it came in high. Actually, the second low bidder for Minnetrista came in lower than the overall low bidder, but we only have one contract. This is the second year this has happened for Minnetrista. So one of the things we could contemplate is going out and doing our own project.
Because we've had some luck with doing this joint bidding in the past, it just unfortunately the last couple of years not gone our way. So
I do know at least one of the other cities that has had this experience as well. And it might just be location, might be from source, might be trucking.
Could you dual bid them or not?
I'm sorry.
Can you dual bid it? Could you bid it with the others, but then also have your separate bid?
You'd have extra costs of doing that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay,
Correct.
I'm
yes.
just, okay. All right.
So, clarify point number 5. Include the crack fill and seal coat of the trail park budget. Is that saying we'll do it, but instead of taking it out of the road budget, we take it out of the park budget?
So it would come out of the Parks and Trails budget.
So
Yeah.
just
Not
moving
the
it,
road
not
budget.
changing the work being done, moving the funding of it. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess my thought on this is, I'm not, on all 5 of them, I'd like to see at least one, preferably the second item, remain in. Because a couple of things on that. First of all, on the road budget, we have the maintenance part, which this is, but we also have the mill and overlay, which is going out to bid. We don't know where the numbers are coming in on that one just yet. There may be some favorability that would offset that. It's a relatively small dollar amount, it's about $8,000. And also to your point about construction contingency costs being relatively stable in a seal coat. We're not dealing with all the problems that we deal with like in Halstead. that I would be comfortable at least leaving one of these things in, like I said, probably item number 2. As number 3, I'm a little bit concerned about because we're shifting the cost. It's not actually a save, but if you're confident we can save some money bidding that separately, then that's fine. But I think, while I appreciate everything here, I think we'd probably get number 2, the second item done, and still not break the budget substantially.
Do we have enough in the road budget to do that? I mean, we do, but because we don't know what the mill and overlay
Yeah, that's
project
the
is
big
gonna come
unknown.
in.
What if the mill and overlay comes back 20, 30,000? I mean, I don't know if it's a trend or if it's fuel costs or if there's different things that are pushing it up, so.
Although maybe to Mr. Molitor's point, 8,000, I mean,
On the
isn't
contingency,
huge. Yeah.
we just run into this problem every year. We're never going to hit the number that we budget, and we're always going to be under. This is an attempt trying to get closer to what we actually budgeted.
Weren't we slightly under budget anyway, by about $20,000?
That was for next. That was my other
Yeah.
thought too. I think it was for next year, but I'm not. Or was it this year?
I think
I
it's
think it was
this
this
year.
year when we reconfigured, yeah. we
Yeah,
started
yeah,
budgeting
right. I knew it was
spend.
one of these two, and that was the other thought. I
That
had
was
is-
about 30.
330 versus
So we
350.
did have a cushion,
Mhm.
Yeah,
so.
going into this, all right. That was another reason why I thought, well, we could add at least one of these back in.
Okay.
I tend to believe that there's a reason we have budgets, and that's to constrain our spending and to make sure that we live within them, and I disagree.
Well, we are, even if you add the 7,900, you're still within the budget.
Oh, I know, but adding this other $8,000 would be going over the CIP.
No, it
project
won't.
budget.
No, it won't.
Then why is it being taken out? I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Well, I think correct me if I'm wrong, I think we had a 350,000 budget originally, but then we had to shift some things around based on when we looked at it for this year, based on what public works could get patched and different things and whatever, and some of the coring and that type of thing.
Right.
So I think we ended up with this amount of, what
think
about
it was-
78,000 for seal coat, and then we've got an amount budgeted for mill and overlay. Well, now we got the bids came in 20,000 more or whatever, so I think we're trying to peel stuff back.
Well, we
based on-
had 350,000, and then the estimates for everything came in at 3
Once
after we moved some
reconfigured
things
the
around.
CIP based on some things that we figured items we had to
330,000.
pull out, correct, yeah.
So if we add the 8,000 in, we're still under the 350. That's what I'm saying. No, what we don't know is what the mill and overlay budget is going to come in at.
Right now, you
That's
have
the
about
only-
20,000 worth of buffer based on if the mill and overlay comes in 20,000.
Right.
It's maybe do you value more getting mill and overlay done if that goes over, or do you value a little more seal coat? I mean, it just. it's
We have
sort of
about
hard to-
$30,000
It's the
budget.
unfortunate consequence of not having these things synced up.
So,
The timing is synced up
Yeah.
when the bids come back.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Okay, well, if it's not sending us over the CIP budget,
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I suppose you can always adjust the mill and overlay to.
We had to.
Yeah.
You have
If
to.
we have to, yeah.
So
All right.
that's fine.
All right. So, approving the resolution to include number 2, Fairway Ridge Court and Fairway Ridge Drive,
But otherwise, yeah, doing the other,
Otherwise-
pulling the other items out as
pulling the
presented.
other items out, yeah.
I'll make the
Okay.
motion.
Okay, Mr. Molitor made that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Tschumperlin seconded that. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. So the 68,131, it'll be
Becomes-
plus 7910, so. All right, so that concludes our business items, and we move on to our staff reports. Mr. Barone?
Yes, Mayor, just 2 short items to discuss. First one is our next meeting is not till Monday, July 16th, that's 4 weeks. So please note that on your calendars. And then just an FYI, the city staff has started our budget process. We started a couple of weeks ago. I think we got another meeting this week, and so we'll be working through that. And I think we're coming back in August, probably.
Yeah, probably both meetings in August
Probably
and in
August to
September.
start talking about budget with the city council for 2019. I think that's all I have.
Yeah, I have 2 items very quickly. Just an update on our 3rd annual bus tour. It went extremely well. We had our 3rd year with a 55-seat bus. We booked 48 riders, 2 staff and 3 speakers. We did have demands for seats up through the day of the event. We had walk-ins. We had 2 who canceled at the very last minute, and we were able to take 2 off our same-day wait list. So that was nice to be able to accommodate people who had driven over. So we traveled all over the city from one end to the other. We did provide maps for all of the riders as well here at City Hall, and we had about 15 people come in and pick up maps that just showed them the route that we completed. So it was just good to have a 3rd year, very successful. I think as we move forward, we're consistently trending upwards as to maxing out our original bus that we've always had. So the cost for our bus rental did go up this year. I had originally negotiated a price from about 5 years ago. And so we were able to hang on to that for about 2 years, but this year it did go up, so we'll just budget accordingly next year. So we appreciate both our speakers coming from the Historical Society and 3 Rivers Park District for coming out and spending some time with us, and we've gotten great feedback from Facebook as well from our riders. So good, very good news. And then just an update, Centerpoint, who is doing the grant that we're being awarded for police department with the AEDs, they'll be coming out on the 16th to present the check at our council meeting. So I just got updated on that at the end of last week as well. So,
Thank you. Okay, any other staff reports? Otherwise, we'll move on to council reports. We'll start with Mr. Tschumperlin.
And I'm easy, I have none.
You have none, okay.
I am too.
All right.
Just a quick update from LMCD. The proposal from Back Channel Brewing to add 4 transient slips was approved, so those will be going into effect now.
I did go on the bus tour, and it was very well done, and everybody that I talked to thoroughly enjoyed it, and would like to do it again, and we'll try to recruit more people, new people next year.
We had a lot of new people
We
this
did,
year,
yeah,
so that,
we
in
did.
fact, I think most of them were new, so
Yep.
that was really good, yeah.
Mhm.
Did the bus tour, great time, lots of fun. Northwest League, it was basically legislative update. Upcoming this week is the annual league conference in St. Cloud. I will be attending the planning commission meeting next Monday or a week, next Monday. Yep, and just one other question, and maybe we can talk about this at a later date. I got a call from a gentleman, and it was in regards to a burn permit. At some point, I thought, with all of these storms and everything, maybe we want to think about our burn permit, and do we want to extend them or have them be longer? I think they're like good for 30 days or something. We don't have to discuss it tonight. I know it's getting late, but maybe we can just put it on a radar screen to give our residents some relief if they have a lot of rubbish and stuff to burn, leaves or whatever, wood. So anyway, just thought I'd bring that up. That's it. So we can be adjourned if there's a motion.
So moved.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion was made by Ms. Bruce, seconded by Mr. Molitor. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much.